Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of The Great Debate, a 10-part webinar series where two guests debate whether a cybersecurity topic should be the top priority right now. Before we jump into today's debate, a few operational items. First, today's session is being recorded and we'll send a link to the recording shortly after the webinar wraps up. Next, there are several opportunities for today's guests to cover audience questions. You can add your question using either the chat or the question panel within GoToWebinar. You'll also notice a poll right now asking you whether you're in favor or opposed to this statement. Cybersecurity frameworks are the #1 cybersecurity priority right now. We'll tally the results and we'll ask again at the end to see if either of our guests change their mind about the topic. Finally, we'll be making a $500 donation to each of today's speakers to a charity of their choice. And with that, I'm going to share the poll results and hand it off to our moderator, Axonius CMO, Nathan Burke, to get started.
All right, so we're at 67% in favor, 33% opposed. All right, so we'll see if our debaters change anyone's mind at the end here. All right, thanks, Anna, and let's get to it. So today's topic is, should cybersecurity frameworks be the #1 priority right now? And our first guest taking the in favor position is Terry McGraw. Terry is a retired lieutenant colonel from the United States Army and now serves as president of PCMatic Federal Division of PCMatic, providing endpoint security to over 500,000 customers and over 2 million endpoints under management with PCMatic software solutions. He retired from the United States Army in 2014, completing 27 years of service. The last 10 years of his Army career were leading key cyber initiatives for the Army's Network Enterprise and Technology Command, Army Cyber Command, and the NSA. Terry, please tell our audience about the charity that you are supporting.
Yeah, I chose the ASPCA, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. I suppose after 27 years in the Army and seeing all the worst in humanity, I guess I prefer the company of animals over people these days. So ASPCA gets my vote.
Love it. All right, so thank you for joining us. And taking the opposing position on cybersecurity frameworks today is Robert Hatke. He has spent over 20 years pushing boulders, slashing the ocean with a sword, and thinking outside the information security box in the manufacturing, healthcare, and retail industries. So Robert, please tell us about your charity.
Yeah, so I picked the Michael J. Fox Foundation. You know, everybody kind of knows about it. It's dedicated to finding a cure for Parkinson's disease through funded research, ensuring the development of approved therapies for those living with Parkinson's. The reason I chose that is because my father-in-law passed away from it, and a lot of my relatives do have Parkinson's. It's a rather debilitating disease to see somebody progress through. And I think it's also a good reminder that while we're all cybersecurity focused and stuff, right, the real thing, you know, comes back to the people. And so, you know, speaking of foundations or security, you know, or frameworks and awareness, you know, it really falls back to the people that we have to be mindful of.
All right, excellent, and thank you for joining us today. So today's topic is cybersecurity frameworks, and to give a bit of context on the topic, I'd like to hand it off to Noah Simon, who is the Director of Product Marketing here at Axonius. So Noah, take it away.
All right, thank you everyone. In today's debate, we're talking about the prioritization of frameworks in general without focusing on any one particular framework. Today, there are numerous security frameworks that security and risk leaders can choose to adopt. Frameworks such as ISO 27001 and the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework, or the NIST CSF, are the predominant enterprise security frameworks, and they're often complemented or supplemented with industry-specific standards and regulations. Frameworks generally define a number of core functions that can help organizations assess the current state of security programs and improve cyber defenses. Frameworks may also provide metrics and other security and other tools to help measure progress in regards to framework adoption and the assessment of security posture. Most frameworks consist of 5 main processes. The first is identify. This function helps the organization identify the existing security touchpoints within the business. Those could be IT assets, resources, information, and more. The second is protect. This is about corporate access control, data security, and maintenance to take care of cybersecurity in and around the business environment. Most likely it is a proactive phase of cybersecurity. The third is detect. This is the function where an organization will identify any potential breaches by monitoring logs or alerts and taking care of intrusion detection procedures at the network and device level. Security information and event management are covered under this procedure as well. The fourth is respond. Once a breach is detected, organizations need to take care of the response procedure by understanding the breach, fixing any vulnerabilities, and proceeding with the recovery. The mitigation, response planning, and improvements are also handled at this stage. And the fifth and final stage is recover. Recover planning procedures like disaster recovery system and backup plans will be handled in this stage of the cybersecurity framework strategy. And with that brief overview, back to you, Nate.
All right, thank you, Noah. And now on to the debate. So the format is as follows. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make their opening statements. After opening statements, I will then read 5 questions that each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. We'll then have final remarks and questions that are open to the audience. So feel free to add your questions at any time, either in the chat or the question function here in GoToWebinar. So this morning, I flipped this coin, and that means, Robert, you can go first, and your 2 minutes will start now.
So pre-warning for everybody, I love analogies. You're going to see a whole lot of analogies, hopefully just in my pitch, but if you ask questions, I'll probably come up with some more. I love them. It's a wonderful way to have context and let the concept sink in. So first of all, kind of, if you think about frameworks, what kind of benefits, right, do most people get for them, right? So the number one thing that I've seen in studies is, oh, well, we can show compliance to said framework, right? Yet if you talk to most security professionals, they'll say, well, compliance does not equal security. So where is that disconnect, right? So the second thing is, okay, so it provides an idea of maturity to the execs, right? Okay, so what defines maturity? Where do you want to be? How do you know where the business wants to be? And thirdly, frameworks tend to give you an idea, hey, we can get, we've implemented this framework, now we can get more budget for this. Okay, well, how many of us here have said our budget's being spent effectively? Where's the people problem for it? Whether it be, I don't think it's ever where, oh, we were spending too much. Well, the reality of it is you might actually be. And so frameworks don't really live up to those promises of those things. So frameworks, really what they do or can lead to is a prison, right? And that's a very closed-minded kind of thing, right? It leads to a check the box mentality, right? The whole compliance thing. Yep, we're compliant in this, blah, blah, blah. We're compliant with ISO, whatever, right? For instance, ISO's goal is really, and they don't want to state this, but it's not really risk-based. They really want you to implement everything, and that's just not reasonable. So the reason why I'm opposed to frameworks is you need to free yourself from those prisons, right? So take the example of Bruce Lee's martial arts Jeet Kune Do, right? So he learned all these martial arts and said, this is the framework, this is the way you have to do it. And he challenged those assumptions, right? And then everybody, right? And so he was really successful in that, and the grandfather of MMA. And he did this not based on a framework, by taking pieces all over and doing his own thing, right? So, and then everybody started, becoming his way, right? Doing his way. So you really need to free yourself from those limits.
All right, great, thank you. And Terry, your time starts now.
Thank you. So there isn't a single architectural structure of note in the physical world that does not start with a blueprint. One's home, a skyscraper, a major city, they all begin with a detailed plan. We build structures of import according to known and established standards. Whether it's a modest design or it's with great complexity of a major metropolitan area, they all begin with a framework. History is replete with tragic examples of what happens when builders of great endeavors deviate from plans, they take shortcuts, they make uncommunicated changes, bridges collapse, balconies buckle, buildings catch fire. Building a communication infrastructure in the logic world is no different. If you don't know where you're going, every road will take you where you never wanted to go. The failures in our communities of practice are not flaws in the frameworks or an over-reliance on them. It's in the failure to live up to the designs of them. A cyber framework, be it NIST, ISO, COBIT, that's not where the failures lie, but rather in ensuring that we fulfill the frameworks in practice. Sadly, the trends in the cybersecurity landscape demonstrate year over year that we aren't even pouring the foundation correctly, much less building to code.
All right. And now let's get into the questions. One reminder again, feel free to add your questions and we will address them at the end. And so here we go. Each guest is going to have 2 minutes to answer the following questions. Here is the first one. So since the time that many frameworks have been established, breaches have only become more frequent. And the question is this because adoption of frameworks are too low? Or is it because frameworks are too lofty and security teams often can't adhere to them? So Terry, we will start with you on this one.
Sure, I think it's not that black and white. The framework, again, is just that, a framework. It's in the pragmatic application that we fall down. And I agree with Robert that it's not putting yourself into the prison of the framework. It's understanding a risk-based analysis of the framework and where you are in relation to that, and where you are in the threat landscape and how you apply it. I do think, however, without that framework, there is a tendency to make assumptions and to overestimate your maturity, to overestimate your pragmatic ability to block threats, not to mention what you know about yourself. And so again, the framework is just there to help you take an honest assessment of where you fit in the cyber threat landscape, where you are internally, and where you should be moving and what direction you should go.
All right, and Robert, same question to you. Go for it.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think what we're debating here is nuances, right? So I mean, there's going to be times when we both agree and both disagree on approach, and that's a good thing, right? That's what makes debates great. But in answer to this question, I really think the frameworks are just too lofty, right? You just can't adhere to them, and I think that's because they're taken as gospel, right? And you try to implement everything, right? And they're not taken to implement them specific to you. You have to know you. You have to know yourself, right? And so the analogy that I like to use is, and sorry, I'm geeking out here a little bit, is a lesser magician versus a great magician, right? So a lesser magician that really knows his craft and really knows his area, right, can probably best a great magician that's very powerful but doesn't know that deep. He isn't that skilled. Yeah, he's a great magician. He can do flame and stuff like that. And I think that comes back to kind of you can't do everything, right? You don't have an infinite budget. The reality is you're not going to have enough trained staff. You're not going to have budget. Instead of lamenting, oh, if only could you use, if only we could do X, you really need to look at what pieces can we do the best.
All right. So on to question 2. So many companies are forced to follow industry-specific frameworks and regulations. So in healthcare, HIPAA or HITRUST, retail being PCI, and there's others. And the question is, do industry-specific frameworks help? Or is the problem that there are no universally adopted frameworks? And Robert, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, so I don't think that they help as perhaps they were intended, right? So if you look at the media, you see lots of examples of companies that are regulated by HIPAA, PCI, pick your favorite letters for regulation. They're still suffering from a lot of incidents. Compliance does not equal security. Hackers don't care about compliance. Hackers actually love companies that are compliant because they probably know where their weaknesses are, right? So it's one of those things that, again, if you're a master karate champion and you're beaten by a kung fu champion, 2 different frameworks, right? Why did it fail? Is that because you're a better fighter? Do you need the right people? And so you can't get caught in this paradigm, right? You can kind of sense a long quote from Bruce Lee. Be like water making its way through cracks. Don't be assertive, but adjust to the object and you shall find your way around or through it. If nothing within you stays rigid, outward things will disclose itself. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. If you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes a bottle, right? So now water can flow or can crash. Be like water, my friend, right? So we have to be flexible and to adapt to those situations, because you're not necessarily going to be stuck by a framework. You always have to have that experience to teach you how to deal with things.
All right, and Terry, same question to you.
Yep. You know what happens to water when the dam breaks because it wasn't built to code? It destroys lives, right? So at the end of the day, don't take the auditor's view of the framework. Take the practitioner's view of the framework. And I agree with you. Compliance is not security. But if you looked at like in the 1100 incident response engagements that I reviewed last year from the last company I was a part of, it's always email. It's 3389. It's a spear phishing. It is the basics. We talk about frameworks being too lofty, folks. We're not even covering the day one portions of it. The failure is not in the framework. The frameworks articulate standards that we should aspire to. And granted, it's a framework. No one says it has to be rigidly adhered to. And why do HIPAA companies or HIPAA regulated companies still have breaches? Because they had 3389 open. They had simple path. They didn't have multi-factor authentication enabled everywhere. I mean, it's the same thing over and over again. It is not the framework that failed. It is the practitioner that failed. And I agree. We don't have unlimited time or budget. But those are not things that you need $1 million point solution to solve. Again, this goes down to the basic fundamentals and tenets of what we're supposed to be doing as cybersecurity professionals. And I do think a framework helps you just articulate what your plan is, and only you, the practitioner, can decide if you're living up to the tenets of that framework. With the adversary.
All right, good segue to the $1 million question. So this is my favorite. We do this in every single episode. So here's the question. As a CISO, or if you were advising a CISO, if you were given one additional headcount and $1 million to dedicate to cybersecurity framework initiatives, where would you start? And so for the in favor candidate, where would you start specifically as it relates to cybersecurity frameworks? And for the opposition candidate, what would you prioritize instead? And we will start with you, Terry.
So in every framework, and to include my own, you start with know thyself. You know, Sun Tzu is great. You really have to understand where you are. And the sad fact of the matter is, most architectures that we defend are not well enumerated. We don't understand everything that's on it, what's critical, et cetera. And so if I were going to get a one head count $1 million, it would be the assessment of where we are as an as is. It would be assessing not only the architecture. One thing we failed to do is assessing the people. I was part of a municipality cleanup. And when we were going into cleanup, I was shocked at the inability of the people responsible for, let's say, their Active Directory structures to actually understand the appropriate way to configure lockdown and architect an Active Directory solution across the municipality that big. And so at the end of the day, I think the job number one is truly assessing where you are in your infrastructure, where you are in your personnel maturity, where are you in understanding what's important to your business or mission if you're in the public sector, and then from there you start on the journey of 1,000 steps of filling in those gaps and shoring up your defenses. But until you understand where you truly are, every other dollar is a waste of money.
All right, and the same question to you, Robert.
So I'm kind of cheating a little bit since it only said one head count, but I'll say it anyways. So Terry used the term and I said prioritize the people, right? So and to use Terry's term, prioritize the practitioners, right? And so again, I think it's a nuanced discussion about the frameworks. And that's why I'm against them is you need to focus on the people, the practitioners, right? So what we're doing in security right now is giving people a Lamborghini. Right? We're buying a Lamborghini, this new toy, this new process, whatever, and we're giving it to people that just got their driver's license. Do we really want to allow them to drive that Lamborghini? Oh, by the way, we're also not hiring the specialized mechanic that can work on that Lamborghini, right? So for that, I guess for the $1 million, right? So I would outsource and bring in those people that have the skills, right? That have driven, professional race car, Lamborghini drivers, the mechanics, the et cetera, right? And then you can bring them on board, right? Again, kind of to a martial arts kind of mentality is we need more mentors. We need like an apprenticeship program so that we can build those practitioners that have that knowledge so they can implement those things successfully. Because security is a human problem and we need people to solve that human problem. And unfortunately, AI Jesus, as much as technology says AI is going to solve all this, and no, we're not there yet, right? So ultimately, it's going to come down to people. You just need to pass along that knowledge, right? And there's nothing that beats experience in in a real fight. You can train people via SANS classes. Here's how you should do stuff, but reality is often different. You need somebody that's a mentor that's been in a fight before and can teach people, as well as, well, I haven't been in that fight before. This might be how I respond. So it really leaves you open, right? Be like water.
Okay. And on to question 4. So a strong understanding of all your company's assets is foundational to most security frameworks. It's usually 1 or 2 in an enumerated list like CIS. So assuming you have a strong understanding of your environment, would a framework still help or would it not? And Robert, this one's yours.
So even though I love asset intelligence, I think it's a foundational thing. I don't think frameworks help quite yet. Kind of to borrow, the quote that Terry said about Sun Tzu, if you know your enemy, if you know the enemy, know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles, right? So asset intelligence is maybe part of knowing thyself, but you still need to know the enemy. You still need to know other things in order to be successful in battle, right? So that understanding of your environment, which I'm taking to like asset intelligence, things like that, you've only completed part of the journey, right? Do you have the right people? Do you know what things you can do with the limited budget? What is the priorities? What is within the context, right? Do you understand the business, right? There's a security culture that all of this is meaningless. All the tools, technology, people in security, if the business culture is not open to security, it really doesn't matter. So you're still partway there yet.
Okay. And the same question to you, Terry.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Robert on this one. I would add to it though. I would say, look, number one, it's not all about company assets. Knowing thyself is a full assessment. It's understanding your infrastructure, physically and logically. It's understanding the people that are participating in that, and I think most importantly, it's understanding your business mission. And what's critical to you and to others, and where you fit in the cyber threat landscape. But don't dismiss. I mean, most of the mature frameworks, NIST 853, 800, 171. If you're in the public sector, you recognize those. The cybersecurity framework of NIST, even ISO standards, they all articulate an understanding of yourself, an understanding of what's important in the business management portions and what's important as far as understanding the threat landscape. They all incorporate that. It's not the framework. It's us putting it into pragmatic application. Again, none of those frameworks dictate how you solve those categories. None of them say this is the solution. They all say here's your problem set. Here's what you need to mitigate those problem sets. And why I'm still a fan of those frameworks is no one person can ever know enough. And even with a team, you're never going to be able to afford all the expertise in a certain area. I mean, finding a person who's gifted in threat intelligence, if you're an individual company, those researchers are very, very hard to come by, and they don't stay in small companies or large companies for very long. They want challenges. Your SOC analysts want to move up. They want to go do other things, and so you're going to always have turbulence in your environment. You're always going to have a changing in your environment, and the framework is there to help you assess where you are at any given point in time and where your gaps are. Again, it's a framework. It's not a dictatorial edict. It is a framework, and most of them are very good. It's, again, the pragmatic application and where we fall down on them, not the framework itself.
All right, and so on to the fifth question here. And before I ask this, I'll plug it one more time. Feel free to ask your questions. We'll get to them. And so here's the fifth one. So the title of this session was, should cybersecurity frameworks be the #1 priority right now? But I think both of our guests would agree that the answer needs to be more nuanced than that. And the final question before we hand it over is, what kind of organizations should prioritize cybersecurity frameworks right now, or what types should focus on other things? And we've asked this in every episode, and it differs by industry, by company size, by maturity. So Terry, let me start with you. Which kinds of organizations should prioritize right now, and what should focus on other things?
Yeah, so again, I think it's that there's innumerable frameworks out there. I think it's really it's a judgment call. Larger, more federated environments require more rigor and probably require a more detailed architectural design than, let's say, a small business. But I would say if you took all of those frameworks, and there are, like I said, dozens, I want everyone to think of it in three ways. The three macro components to any framework, and I believe in any security operations that you would run inside a business or an organization, have to have three fundamental things. Number one, you have to have an understanding of yourself, right? And that means you in your entirety. That's one triangle. You know, in the NSA, we had it was called the diamond triangle for attribution. You had at the top of the triangle, you had the adversary. At one point of the diamond, you had the TTPs that they used. On the other point, you had the infrastructure they leveraged, and then you had your victim at the final point. And that's great for your adversarial view. And you need an adversarial view. What am I? Where do I fit in the cyber threat landscape, and who are my adversaries? Not based on my mission, but where I connect to other things, and understanding where you fit in that. So I understand myself, I understand the adversary, I understand what I represent to an adversary holistically. And the last part, and this is hugely important, understanding what is critical to your business, what it takes you to survive. In that same municipal cleanup, they had contained all the logical information about what their critical assets were on the critical assets that were locked up in a ransomware attack. What were my vendors? What was the version of the software? Could the software be upgraded? Who do I contact? Am I under warranty? Is there an on-prem versus a cloud solution? You name it. All of that infrastructure was locked up. And my point to all that is, it's not good enough just to have the framework. You have to have the ability to apply it pragmatically. Again, back to my pragmatism. And so you need a view of yourself, a view of the adversary, a view of the outcomes of your business or mission, and have to continually have that knowledge base in an analog format. We were talking about analog before the show started. There's nothing wrong with a 3-ring binder.
All right, and Robert, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to answer the first question, which organization should prioritize it, right? If there were frameworks, there's kind of two answers to that. One, organizations that have those practitioners and the knowledge in place, right? Who have the right people, the right understanding of the business and cultures, and they're a little bit further in the maturity process. As well as, organizations that are kind of forced to be put into those HIPAA, PCI, federal regulations, et cetera, would have to be forced in them. But you still, again, need to have those practitioners to know what are the limitations, right? You just can't implement something without understanding what it's going to do. And we see that all the time. Hey, we need 15 character passwords. Oh, crap. Well, that broke this application that was written 20 years ago or whatever, right? So you have to understand what the risks are of you doing that. What types of organizations should focus on other things? I kind of answered it in this way. Honestly, and this is kind of, like I said, the Bruce Lee kind of approach is, I think there's general agreement on what things need to be done. I think what needs to be done for all organizations is get back to the basics, get back to the foundationals, right? That's what good sports teams do. If you look at them, football, the ones that have really good offense, really good defense, they may not do something fancy, but they really got the fundamentals down, end up winning the games. And so whatever makes sense for that business, whether it be asset intelligence, access management, et cetera, that's what they should focus on and get really good at it.
All right. So that concludes the main question section. And now we will let each guest give their final remarks. After that, we will poll the audience one last time and then open it up for audience questions. And so now we will start with Terry. You can start now.
I think we summed up the argument on both sides pretty well. And again, Robert's right. This is a nuanced discussion. Frameworks have a place, and I don't want to don't conflate frameworks with audit controls, like audits and compliance. There is a reason for those audits and compliance. And I'll tell you, in a lot of respects, some businesses fear auditors more than they fear the adversary, because there's a guaranteed fine associated with HIPAA violations, right? And so sometimes they'll far exceed what a ransomware may be. But my point is, the framework is just we need referees in the NFL for a reason, right? There is a playing field, and there's rules that we all have to live by, just like the blueprints from an architectural design. The framework is understanding where to start, understanding what your goal line is at, and then giving you some ability to guide in your decisions in a very balanced and programmatic way. Does a framework guarantee your success? Hell no. If you never get past the basics, it doesn't matter how lofty the aspirations of the framework are, you're not getting past the basic fundamentals. I agree with Robert. Fundamentals win the game. And again, back to my earlier point, it's never well, I should say it's only about 8% of the incident response engagements that we see that involve an advanced tradecraft of a nation state style actor or a campaign level APT. This is commoditized e-crime, and basic blocking and tackling would work. So yeah, I think it's a little unfair to paint all the frameworks in a negative light simply because we aren't living up to simple fundamentals of the game. And that said, the frameworks are there to help guide you and help you along the way, not to restrict your maneuver.
All right. And Robert, over to you.
Yeah, so if you think about it, for those that have been in industry a long time, right, security hasn't fundamentally changed. We're fighting the same problems over and over. Frameworks haven't changed, right? So what needs to change? And it's those practitioners, right? And you need to do those the basic stuff well, right? So Bruce Lee said, "I fear not the man who practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times," right? So do the fundamentals and do them very well. And then I'll kind of, leave you with hopefully maybe the last analogy, right? So Bruce Lee said, when you first come to martial arts, you learn, you think, oh, a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick, right? And then you learn martial arts, right? And then they're like, oh no, you gotta do it this way and hold it this way. That's where I think the frameworks kind of to sit in. Yes, they're guides, but they're not the be all end all. And when you progress towards mastery, right, you get to be the better practitioner. You have mentors. You become the master. You learn in the end, a kick is a kick, and a punch is a punch, right? In the fight, it doesn't matter if you block this way or whatever. As long as the end result is you blocked attack, you survived attack, you survived the auditor, things like that. The other thing, again, back to the practitioners, right? This is why I favor people over frameworks is because when you have frameworks, it becomes the answer, right? You have to check the box. And that's unfortunately what we have with auditors, right? So we have to have those auditor practitioners. We need to change the people so that they realize that just checking the box doesn't mean anything.
All right. So Bruce Lee, Sun Tzu, NFL referees. This one has been a ton of fun. So let me hand it over to Anna.
Magicians too.
I forgot the magicians. I'll edit this so I sound like I know what I'm talking about. All right, Anna, over to you.
Awesome. So we'll run the poll again. As a reminder, the first results were 67% were in favor of the statement and 33% were opposed. So we'll give the audience a few seconds to answer. And here are the results.
All right.
I'd like to ask to stop counting, please. Recount.
We will do a hand recount after this.
No, I appreciate that. That was good. I mean, Terry did a wonderful job, and I think honestly the right answer is it's a little bit more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
The answer's in the middle. Absolutely.
All right. So Noah, do we have some audience questions?
Sure. We have a few questions that came in, and feel free to add any additional ones in the questions panel within GoToWebinar. The first question asks, for companies that are using frameworks, how do you recommend teams track progress in their efforts alongside these frameworks? So Robert, Terry, any thoughts there?
Yeah, two ways. Number one, there's lots of ways to programmatically do it. There's lots of software will help, but I like to use the analogy that the organization's only as good as what the boss checks. I think a clearly defined set of KPIs that are well understood, that are measurable, something like the OKR system, something where you have a defined objective and key performance results that are quantifiable, is the way to do that. And if it's easy to measure, it's probably the wrong thing to measure. But again, I think it's taking a very, very quantitative view. I know qualitative is something we all like to gravitate to as humans, but you need to be able to measure your progress. And so I think a well-defined KPI, and measure what's important, measure what matters, to use the book's Texas frame.
Yeah, I would agree with measurement, right? So metrics are important, but I think the metrics have to be such that they drive a business objective, a business reason. What am I trying to accomplish by doing this, right? So, if it's phishing, we're trying to reduce phishing. What metrics do you have that show that it's actually reduced phishing, right, in your company? And I think you can measure everything, right? Both quantitatively and qualitatively. There's a book, How to Measure Anything in Information Security is I think the book. Their first book was How to Measure Anything, right? So there's ways that you could accomplish those metrics, right? And I agree with Terry. It shouldn't be something that's, oh, this is an easy metric, right? It should be more proactive, forward-looking metrics than reactive, easy to get.
Excellent. Thank you both. The second question is a slightly different topic than what we discussed during most of today's debate, but I think it's still an interesting one to touch on. Privacy regulations like GDPR and CCPA pose a set of requirements that may not be accounted for security frameworks. How should organizations approach these privacy regulations in addition to any other security frameworks that they are currently working on?
Yeah, carefully. So remember, most regulations are written by lawyers, not practitioners. And so as a consequence, when you answer a question that involves a regulation, it's always good to check with your legal team first. Because I guarantee you what you assume GDPR contains about their definition of PII, et cetera, is not what's actually written. In fact, it's back and forth, and even the legal team will debate it ad nauseum. But again, they have dire consequences for business if you should screw it up. And often it is the determination of what that regulation means from the legal standpoint that will empower the IT team or the cyber defense team to go do it, and whatever that determination is. But if you as the IT team try to figure out what the answer, what right is and what will stand in a court of law, or when the auditors show up or the regulators show up, you will be grossly mistaken. Or if you got to the right answer, it would be by happenstance. So I'm telling you, the first step in all of that is to consult your legal team and get a legal standing on it before you go start building anything.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So after the kind of legal stance, right, and it's a good point that, frameworks, privacy regulations, all the regulations are written by technical people or lawyers, right? They're not written by the practitioners necessarily that actually implement them. They're not written by people that understand human behavior, right, to actually implementing those things. So I actually think there is good resources out there to take those privacy things and abstract them, right? So I'm a big fan, like Bruce Lee, right? You learn from multiple different views, right? Economics, philosophy, human behavior, evolution, whatever, right? Take it from multiple sources, right? I think you can abstract those privacy issues into security items. There's a wonderful book by, it's called The Privacy Manifesto, and I forget her name. She was at Cisco, and I think she's since left Cisco. She was the chief privacy officer, but it really talks about more on the software development side, but you can easily abstract that into any security program to implement. I mean the foundations, and I think Terry and I agree with that. The foundations for all this just really do universally walk across all those things. It's just the practitioners getting those foundational stuff correct.
Mm-hmm. I'm proving you can do it.
Excellent. Thank you both. Those are all the questions we have for today. And if there are any others that come in, we can try and answer them offline. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Anna, over to you.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So that concludes our debate. Would like to thank both Terry and Robert for participating today. We'll be sending a link to the recording, and be sure to join us for the final episode of the Great Debate on December 15th, where Karen Jackson of Apogee Strategic Partners and Daniel Wood of CyberReason will debate whether IoT security should be the top cybersecurity priority right now. This series is sponsored by Axonius, the cybersecurity asset management company that gives customers a comprehensive asset inventory, uncovers security gaps, and automatically validates and enforces policies. To try Axonius free for 30 days or to get a demo, go to axonius.com. Finally, we're excited to be making a donation to ASPCA on behalf of Terry McGraw, and a donation to the Michael J. Fox Foundation on behalf of Robert Hack. Thank you all for joining, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.